Hi, everybody. It's really great being here. I wanted to say thanks for everybody behind the scenes who made this day possible. A lot of hard work I know goes into it, so I really appreciate it, and I'm sure we all do too. Today, I'm going to be talking about deploying a dam at HelloFresh remotely, mostly by yourself, and in 3-ish months. That's kind of a cute way to talk about dam implementation with limited resources, doing so offsite and on a tight schedule. And so the themes of this are pretty evident, I think, just from the title, right? The overarching point is you can do this, right? So you can do this with limited resources, you can do this remotely, and you can do this on a very tight schedule. And the funny thing about that is if we're able to roll out dams with limited resources, offsite, and quickly, maybe in some circumstances, maybe it's just a better way to do it. So who I imagine that I'm talking to right now, and I'll find out in a little bit, I can't wait to meet some of you, are a few people who are interested in those things, right? In rolling out a dam with those attributes. It's kind of funny, about 2 years ago, when I was in the middle of rolling out the dam for HelloFresh, this was the spring of 2019, I was actually in your seat attending a Henry Stewart Dam conference presentation about someone who had rolled out a dam in a similar situation. And so I would say that the primary person that I'm talking to here are all of those me's out there, right? The people who are in that situation of they've been tasked to implement this tool for the team, and they feel like they're under resourced. I'm also talking to everybody really who's involved with DAM, who are working in this COVID environment, this COVID world. We're all either working remotely or hybridized work of some kind. And so when I rolled mine out, I had to do so from Boulder, Colorado, and a lot of the creative production teams were in New York City. So this was pre-COVID, but I think that a lot of the things that I went through can apply to this brave new world, right? And then this last one, implementing DAM on a very tight schedule, the people who are interested in that could obviously be the same types of people that we just mentioned, but I'm also thinking about people who are maybe the leaders of a team who are kind of faced with this conundrum of either having to roll out and implement a DAM in the traditional way, where it takes, you kind of do it, quote unquote, the right way, and you're taking a very long time to study the situation, get everything right, and then implement and roll it out. Those people, I imagine, are also intrigued with the idea of how can we roll out a dam in those situations much quicker, and how can we roll out a minimally viable product? How can we get something out that starts to contribute to the team immediately and add value immediately? What does that look like? And those are questions that I think that my experience at HelloFresh can at least give you a little insight into. Let's see here. Okay, so sorry, my advanced buttons are a little sticky. So in talking about that, this is the outline of how we're going to talk about these things, right? So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to start with the insights. And the reason for that is because I want you to listen for in my telling of the narrative, my storytelling. I want you to listen to those little points that that happened through my story that feed into those insights. So we're going to start with insights. Then we're going to talk about the primordial soup, is what I'm calling it. This is the conditions, the business conditions, and the situation that our team, our work, and our business as a whole were in, and from which the dam and its development came from. That gets us to a place where we're establishing that we need a dam, right? But how to proceed from there is the next question. And so there are the two paths. You know, there's the expected kind of like proper way, careful, methodical way, and then there's the way that we took. And so I wanted to show those contrasted to each other. After that, once we've chosen that path of an accelerated rollout, I'm just going to quickly go through the linear narrative of how our dam unfolded all the way up until today, because usually when you roll things out as quickly as we did, there's always going to be things on the back end that you didn't do as a part of the rollout that have to be done still in order to have a successful system. Once we've gone through all of that, we're gonna talk about the insights again and review those. So the insights that I pulled from this are, I try to make them pretty simple and not too, I guess, nuanced. But you know, the first one is, even though you might feel alone, you're not alone. I know I had a lot of people help me along the way, and it's really just a matter of finding your tribe, and whether that's someone who's actually a part of your business function, who's naturally a part of your tribe, or people on the creative team who happen to have that tendency toward having an organizational mindset, and then so many others, of course. Related to that, it's building relationships. You know, if we're remote, the importance of really getting to know folks and I don't want to say necessarily befriending, but you know, definitely having some level of understanding of what the problems that they face are, and making sure that they understand that this project, this work is there to make life a little bit easier. This not only expands our shadow government, as I call it, in the business, but it also helps when you're remote. Speaking of being remote, and these three things you can tell are all related to each other. Make the most of your on-site visits. You know, if you're a hybrid working, you know, it's important to really make the most of that time that you have with people. I know I had to when I was out making on-site visits in New York, and I think that what I saw was that went a really long way to help move the needle in certain directions. So you know, stuff like going out to lunch, bringing snacks to people, shadowing folks, asking lots of questions, being interested in what they do. And then these are kind of some broad points. You know, something that I took away from this whole experience was that single source of truth is more important than an over-engineered system. You know, the dam for anybody is usually introduced because we're trying to fight against the tide of so many different storage tools that people have, and so much progress can be made on a team, and so much time and energy can be saved if you just establish a single storage platform, whatever that is. And so and often that's dam for us, you know, so that's great. And so if we keep that in the front of our mind, it kind of makes some of the challenges that you face a little bit easier to deal with. Related to that, you can clean up anything. Be focused on adding value first. Um, it's actually just in a sense, it's a great approach because it's job security. You're rolling something out, but in order for it to be truly successful and really integrated into the team, you're always going to be needing to do more stuff on the back end. While you're doing that stuff on the back end, it is adding value to those who are using it. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And then something that we used an off-the-shelf tool, and we treated it initially as just storage, kind of an archive, this DAM 1.0 type tool, right? And because these tools and DAM in general has advanced so much over the years, they function pretty much as easily as a lot of the boxes that we're familiar with, the drop boxes and the box.coms and stuff. You can launch them pretty quick and with little little resources. You can always build those ecosystems in advance from DAM 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 in the future. So those are my top level things that I took away. I also want to mention before I get going, I think my slide deck wins for two things. It wins for being the most meta deck of the day because it's aesthetically challenged, let's call it. This deck isn't the prettiest deck of them all, which means that number two, it won the ugliest deck of them all. But the first one, meta, it really hits home the whole message. The aesthetic itself hits home the message that I'm trying to hit home in the content of the deck, right? That it's important to get something out the door. And it doesn't always have to be the prettiest as long as it's doing its job, right? It makes me feel better. I don't know. I'm sure some people are rolling their eyes, some people are laughing, but anyway. The next thing, let me make sure I didn't skip a slide. Okay, insights, because I have a sticky advanced button. Okay, so the next thing is what I had called before the primordial soup from which our DAM emerged from. And that's just a fun way of identifying the context that existed in 2018 that led to the demand of our DAM. So we're going to look first at HelloFresh, the business and the culture, and then the brand team, kind of narrowing in. We're going to start broad and narrow in, and then we're going to get down to the creative operations part of the team. So looking at HelloFresh, in 2018, it was still very much in culturally in the startup mode. And it still is in a lot of ways. But what that means is that there was very little structural or systemic maturity. And the business was so focused on growth that any sort of standardization, it wasn't discouraged, but it was generally viewed as an obstacle to innovation. And so, which is fine, because that's you need to, throw gasoline on the fire at that point in the business. But for people like us who like order and structure, it's a little challenging. But also simultaneously, the business was also pretty simple as far as its offerings. So there was one primary brand, that's HelloFresh, and they had two much smaller new brands, Green Chef, which was brought on through an acquisition in earlier 2018, and Every Plate. And they were much smaller, but they were growing quickly. We also had one product type, which was just that weekly subscription. If you're familiar with HelloFresh and meal kits in general, it's that weekly subscription box. So we had one product type, and that applied to each of those brands. That's all to say that basically our structure, our product structure was pretty simple. But there was a lot that was changing. We knew that there was more products coming down the horizon. We know that there were probably going to be new brands coming on the horizon as well. So that was going to get more complex. The brand team itself, the New York team is the core team, you might say, and they, through the acquisition with Green Chef, had grown from just one photo studio to 2 photo studios, and 1 publishing team to 2 publishing teams. And so with that, you know, comes an increase complexity in the type of work that was being output, and just the raw increase in output itself. Just the number of the production itself was starting to skyrocket as you bring in more people. When you add the fact that HelloFresh was the work itself was about to get more complex, and with the product and brand complexities, there was kind of this you can sense a little bit of a need starting to percolate. Next, we'll look at creative operations. Like a lot of other businesses that I've heard of, and brand marketing teams, at the time we had no centralized work management system, and then we had just a plethora of storage tools. We had loose hard drives, we had 2 box accounts, a Dropbox account, 3 servers, Google Drive, which is our standard suite that we use at HelloFresh, and we had no data management plan for any of those things. I would say maybe the one that had a clear definition was the server, which held working files and whatnot for the creative teams and studios. But everything else, it was pretty much a free for all. And all of our data management at this time, like metadata, file names, all of that, it was all centered around the moment in the process where the final approved assets were handed off to stakeholder. Once that handoff was complete and the stakeholder had what they needed, basically we could have just deleted the assets, because the structure, the organizational structure, folder structures and whatnot that we had created were completely designed just to facilitate that handoff. There was no interest at the time in creating structures that helped feed into any sort of archiving. On top of all of that, all of our processes were undocumented, and there was no established data management plans. So this is all to say, just to simplify this one slide, it's to say that we were in a place where our team, specifically, there's a couple people on our team who had the vision to know that in order to be successful and to move with the speed of the business, DAM was imminent. We had to get one. And then, of course, my slide is stuck again. Okay. So now that they put all the work into deciding, that we're going to put together a business case, presented the business case, got it approved. We have this choice before us. How are we going to roll this out? We have the expected or the traditional route, you might say, or the accelerated route. I like to cover this in a little bit more detail, just because I think the delta between the two is so interesting, right? So the expected or traditional route, and this is from things that I've read, people I've talked to and interviewed, is something along the lines of, and maybe this has changed, maybe accelerated more standard now or something, but at least a couple of years ago, this is what I was seeing. There's an expectation of 1 to 2 years of planning, testing, configuring, migrating data, training, and implementing the system. That's all supported with a careful study of the current state, exhaustive audits of the possible use cases, target use cases, and asset types. There would be a dedicated team composed of individuals experienced in creative production and led by someone with DAM experience. And then there would be opportunities for cross-functional collaboration with, plug in any department, any team here, but product, IT, and marketing to build and add to existing ecosystems. For us, we took, I don't remember, is it the red pill or blue pill? We took the accelerated pill, right? 3 to 4 months of planning, testing, configuring. So instead of 1 to 2 years, we have 3 to 4 months to do all of that. Our workflows and outputs at this point on the team were so inconsistent and ad hoc, and there was too little time to roll this out to study or document any of those workflows. Instead of having a dedicated team, it was yours truly who was asked to help with this. And I had no experience in DAM. I had very little experience with creative production. At the time, I was focused on publishing and publishing processes, which had some relationship and acknowledgement or understanding, familiarity with the relationship between the publishing and the photo studio and the outputs that came from the photo studio. So there was a little bit of familiarity there, but I wouldn't say by any means that I was a pro quite yet. And I was remotely located, as I already mentioned. I was in Boulder. The team by and far was mostly located in New York. And at the time, I was given only half of my time to focus on the DAM. So 20 hours a week approximately for DAM and to do all of this that we just talked about. And the other 20 hours were to fulfill the other duties that I had at the time. That didn't last for long. I ended up getting shifted over to full-time on DAM because it was so needed, but that's how it started. And then, as I mentioned, because HelloFresh was at that kind of startup mindset or startup culture, there wasn't any data ecosystems that even existed for me to explore and plug into. So that's the path we're going to go, right? We're going to take that pill. This next slide I thought was interesting. This is, you probably can't see it very well, but I'm just off the back of my, top of my head, all the things that you need for a DAM to be successful. I'm probably missing some things. Some of these things could be kind of duplicative. They might nest into each other, but generally, I'd say that this is pretty close to what's required. Things like having a user management plan, having a usage plan, setting permissions, having a governance plan, a full set of documentation, audit schedules, response plans. And what I mean by that are like how to respond to certain situations, like when a new product is introduced, how exactly are you going to adjust the taxonomy, for example. Metadata management, you can go through and read it. I don't want to waste your time with that, but the point being, there's a lot, right? And that's the reason why standard DAM rollout plans take a long time, because they try to get, and that's what I'm trying to get at here visually, is that the green represents everything that you want to do first, and the yellow represents everything that you want to do later. And the standard route tries to do a lot. It tries to get all of this stuff in the lower row completed before launch. And that's why it takes longer, right? And so what we did was we focused on the things that would create a system that was going to add value first. And so we targeted just a few things out of this list. we had to have some user management. Now, it wasn't the complete user management, but we needed some sort of plan to manage users. We needed to move legacy data over into the system. Did we move all of our data? No, we just brought in we were very careful with what we thought would be useful to the team. We made plans for, well, I could keep going on, but the point being, we'll cover this later, but the point being, we targeted the things that would get a functional tool out to our team quickly. Okay. And this is just another way of looking at it a little bit, just to kind of help ground you in the time frame that we're talking about here. 2018 was pre-dam. I wasn't brought on into this project until very, very late Q4 2018. I think it was only a few weeks before I flew to New York in January to actually start the process, probably like 2 weeks or something. So my time with this project really begins there in 2019 and extends until now. And the time that we're focused on is really the whole time, but the launch period is the first 3 months of 2019. Why I say the whole period is because if we go back to this slide, if you only do certain things up front, you still have to do those other things later. And so the rollout of the dam never really stopped, in a sense, in this format. And that's a key thing to note for any of you who have to be in this position. And so this is just an outline of the things that the steps that we took, and we'll cover each one of these one by one. I'll go pretty quick because we don't have very much time. I'm only going to cover the ones that are bolded here because I wasn't involved in building the case and choosing which dam and all of that. But I was involved in system configuration, defining the system scope, developing the rollout plan, testing, reconfiguring, and I'll mention why we had to reconfigure, rescoping, and bringing in a portion of our legacy data into the system, and then launch. Come on. Okay. So configuration, this part of it happened in January of 2019. I was pretty much on site for this whole period. So I was able to establish relationships with the studio and a lot of our targeted user groups. A functioning initial taxonomy and established a basic system navigation, like homepage and links and stuff like that helped people to navigate through the system. So it was pretty straightforward, pretty easy at that point. You might think that you'd want to do scope first and then configuration, but it wasn't until after we did that where we really settled on the scope, which was going to initially just target the relationship between the photo studio and our creative team. And so the dam was only going to store and organize photos from the studio. And that meant that our searchers, our searching users, yeah, I don't know, that sounds weird. They would be just looking for photos. And then they would be taking those photos and putting them into a composite design that would then be handed off to their the primary stakeholder of the project. Those composite designs were not going to be in the dam originally. So let me advance here. I don't know why it's being this way. I apologize. Okay. The rollout plan was next after we set the scope. we're going to develop a plan for, and this is all, by the way, I went back to Boulder. I was doing a lot of this part of it from a remote situation. So we developed a plan for capturing new production. That was key. Viewed it as like a, trying to connect a reservoir to, or a swimming pool, I think is what Bill called it. Connecting the swimming pool to a source, and like a hose of water or something that brings in assets into your system. And so the number one thing that was super important was to capture new production. We were also going to target, initially the plan was to just release this as a tool for the creative team, and then they were going to test it, basically give us feedback, and then we we're going to expand it out to the publishing team. They were going to test it, and then so on and so forth, all the way up to our global partners. We started, soon after that, we started to test the system. And this was just real basic testing, like uploads, do the taxonomies make sense? There were a lot of dependencies in our system, like tagging dependencies and stuff that we had to be mindful of. And we were just looking for those types of things. Does navigation make sense? We brought in a few folks from the creative team to poke around and see if they could find a test group of data. Soon after that, we were faced with our first challenge, or the biggest challenge, I would say. We were about 1 month out from our scheduled launch, and our brand team merged with our marketing team. And what that meant was that the scope of the dam was suddenly going to expand. This was going to include, remember how I said that the original purpose was to facilitate the handoff of photos to composite designs, and those composite designs would be stored somewhere else and handed off somewhere else. Well, just 1 month out, that scope was completely exploded, and we had to incorporate basically all of the production that the brand team did or was responsible for. This required us to rescope and reconfigure. So this all happened, everything I'm about to list happened in about less than a week. So we had to create new user groups. Before, we didn't really have user groups because it was just, it was just a handful of people, and we were going to build this out slowly. They were all on brand teams, so we didn't really have to worry about permissions at this point. But now, with so many different people from the business joining and using the tool, we had to create a much more robust set of user groups. We had to make huge changes to the taxonomy, navigation. So it was almost like a repeat of what we had already done just a few weeks before launch. Nothing like that to make you excited to feel alive or something. So we had to update navigation. There was going to be a new rollout plan. The whole iteration thing where we're going to start with one team and then slowly work out, that was just thrown out the window. We're going to open this up to everybody, and all at once, just let her rip. That did require us to have new permissions plan so that we made sure that certain people, like on the marketing team, weren't accessing brand resources and using, things that we would rather have control over. And then a new upload plan, because now we had a whole new set of people who were adding whole new set of asset types to the system. And this is where we actually had one of the most innovative things. I wish I could take credit for it, but it was someone on the creative ops team who suggested that we actually have the designers and the photographers themselves be responsible for uploading to the dam, uploading final and approved assets. And that was how we were going to accomplish, because again, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have a team here who could upload these things. So we had to tweak that plan and hand those reins over to the creatives themselves. show them how, this was a challenge. It was fun, it was interesting, it was innovative to do it this way, but trying to teach creatives the nuances of a taxonomic system was challenging. And so there was a lot of cleanup in the first few months, but it worked out. And to this day, we still have a good chunk of our assets flowing into the dam, uploaded by our creative teams. Sorry about that.
Hi, Mike.
Yep.
I'm sorry to jump in. We are starting just to get to the end of the session now. So we've had some great feedback in the chat here. So I don't want to cut you off too much, but if you're able to speed through the end of the presentation, that would be wonderful.
Awesome. I'm so sorry, everybody. Yep. Just getting a little chatty here. So we launched. I'll just wrap this up really quick. There's not much to call out here. That was a pretty straightforward launch. After the launch, it's when as you expect, the business landscape changed. We had expanded brand and product portfolios, growing teams, different production rates, higher production rates, different types of work that we were outputting, including video, new systems to deal with and whatnot. And so we just responded to that by expanding our team. Isabel, if you're there, hi. And then rebuilding some things that we didn't get right when we first launched it, essentially. That led to our next steps, which are kind of overlapping with the previous slide of what we were doing in response to the changing landscape. But it's going back to that initial list that I showed you in the beginning, where there are a lot of things that you need to do after you launch in this type of a method of rollout. So again, that brings us back to insights. Since we've already covered it, I think we can leave this for later, and I will go over to Q&A. Sorry about going over time. I have your questions up here on the right, and I'll just read through. It looks like, okay. Any plan to share this PowerPoint later? Yeah, feel free to reach out to me and we can get something set up. Looking forward to how exciting. You get to watch me read and comprehend questions.
We have had just one question, it looks like, Mike.
Oh, okay.
Saying, looking forward to the presentation. In our condensed launch schedule, we had to make some decisions, band-aids, minimum viable product, and judgments. Now dust has settled, I'm struggling with getting back to fixing, enhancing, and improving things. Since it's functional, no one wants to work on it. So there's not an exact question there, but anything you'd like to just quickly respond to that comment?
Dust has settled. I'm struggling to get back to fixing, enhancing. I went through the same thing, so I can relate. There was a period in late 2019 and early 2020 where my role was expanding to include our full creative stack, not just DAM. And so unfortunately, some of the things that we had to leave for later stagnated, but thankfully, because we did do a good job and we did address certain things up front, it was a functioning tool for the team. As far as getting back to fixing it, it wasn't really until I honestly finally built a business case to expand our resources to improve our dam that I was able to get some help, and we've had two different folks who have joined and helped us with all kinds of cleanup and things like that, and that was just immensely helpful. I don't think that that's too helpful if you kind of need to get on it now. I'd say that maybe targeting the things like any other thing in life, right? Like identifying the lowest hanging fruit. I hate that phrase, but lowest hanging fruit, and just incrementally tackling those things.